We have the next panel make their way up to the stage. That'll be great. Talking about the power of minority transactions, which has been a bigger topic the past couple of years. So please, guys, want to come up for the next panel?
There's only us up there, so. Is this me? Yeah, it seemed like it. I think Gail and Sean. Oh.
Let's knock it out.
We really go back and forth with that one.
Yeah, I like it. Yeah, let's do it. Yeah, that's good.
You feel I'm not sure if Gail is. Where you from? My whole family from there. My entire family.
Nashville, good old Nashville. Yeah, we're here. Yeah, the headquarters in Nashville. We have an office here in Fort Lauderdale.
I'm born and raised in Detroit.
Yeah, so you guys can get started whenever you want.
Okay.
Yeah.
Cool.
Get out the wing it.
Yes, close to right.
You ready?
Yeah.
All right. Hello, everyone. My name is Damon Kirk. I'm CEO of Obsidian Banking. We're a neobank. We're headquartered out of Detroit, Michigan. We're really centered on bringing financial literacy and wellness to Black Americans. We really want to bring that analog approach, go door to door, really make an imprint on people. And let me introduce Quincy over here.
Hi. Quincy McKnight, CEO of Covenant Pay, headquartered in the best city in America, Nashville, Tennessee.
So I'm going to start it off with a question from Georgia, since we're in Georgia. Over the last 10 years, the average consumer business grew about 62%, while in Georgia, minority businesses grew about 99%. What do you think it is about the Georgia location that is so successful to minority businesses? And do you think we could replicate that on like a national level? And do you think payments, like some of the payment technology can like facilitate that?
That's a good question. From the perspective of where we are as a company, Covenant Pay, we are a global payment processor, ISO, and we are growing in a lot of these underserved markets, such as Atlanta and the Nashvilles and the Dallases of the world. And one thing we have recognized, and we're watching the trends of seeing who's setting the pace for the power of that minority transaction. It's very important because right now, as we see it, the black community leads the country in consumerism and as far as percentages of the trending of the spending. I think they said that by 2030 that the Black community will spend approximately in the consumer dollar 1.7 trillion annually in that. And so we lead going back to your question, Atlanta is a very predominantly Black market with business owners, several different communities and community leaders that are pushing for these types of changes. And what we're seeing is watching the trend happen it's amazing because you got banks like you guys, you have the other neo-style banks that are popping up around the country, and they're seeing the trend because they understand the power of the minority, how the money circulates in the black and brown communities in America. So the money circulation is very critical, for the different types of communities, the consumers and business. So.
Okay, so just to follow up with that, a recent McKinsey report found that 1 in every 4 Black Americans found dissatisfaction with their current products, and about 6 out of every 10 Asian Americans. While we know that we're leading some of these consumer trends, there seems to be a disconnect in how these companies are marketing to us. Where do you think that disconnect is at with some of these bigger companies and how they portray us in marketing, imagery, and why do you think that we feel so lost in this world?
Well, I think number one, our branding, our corporations, our retail markets out in America right now, they have to understand who they're selling to and who's buying. Going back to what I previously said, the black dollar we're spenders. We're big spenders, right? And unfortunately not big savers, right?
Facts.
So when retail giants know that information, that's when they should see where the power of the transaction should go. So if they see us spending, then that means brand loyalty has to come in place. Brand loyalty, there's the looking at the financial stability for potential economic growth in different communities around America right now. That's where we have to line that stuff up at, because if our corporation if we're not following the numbers and seeing the trends, then what are we doing? Because especially if you're talking to the number one consumer community, which is the black race in America,
True.
what are we doing? We're missing the giant, because are we really marketing to them? For years, what used to upset me when I would see commercials, the wrong type of business was attracting our communities, right? Your alcohol, your cigarettes, your things that that's not conducive for growth, especially economic growth. And so now that the tide is changing, more black families, more black and brown families are making a lot more money. Things have to change. And we should, part of those communities in America right now, especially in Atlanta, you have to hold these brands accountable for that type of information. Because right now, I know there are several consumer retail giants right here, headquartered right here in Atlanta. And so you have to ask, who are they really marketing to? Are they really taking advantage of the market and actually investing and reinvesting the money that they're getting?
A really big thing is that they have to go into it with a good energy and with a good mindset on it. Over the last 2 years, we've seen the expansion of buy now, pay later. And with us being such a consumer-focused, race and consumer-focused in general, I've seen how buy now, pay later is kind of taking a stranglehold on our community. We have to make sure that these companies, when they do this research, they're not taking this information and being predatory with it, and they're not introducing these, some of these credit traps and payday loans. How can we make sure that the information that we are giving them isn't being used to put us in some of these bad situations that we've also always been in?
Well, I'm going to put that responsibility a little bit back onto the banks.
Okay.
And the reason why I say that is because the banks, just like a church in the black community, is the pillar. It's the pillar of that community. And so when you have your banks reinvesting, if you have people coming and depositing their money every week into that bank needs to reinvest those funds or reinvest education, community education, business education back into these communities.
And it can't just be superficial.
No.
So in 2021, Wells Fargo invested in 13 black-owned banks. That same year, Wells Fargo denied 53% of their black mortgage applications. So it can't be a halfway investment into the community, or you're going to leave out so much equity. And so, we had such, cheap interest rates over the last 2 years. And we were gate-capped out of so much wealth, so much expansion, so much equity. And it's the little things like that that continue to build up and kind of limit the power of minority transactions, kind of limit some of that equity, some of that future leverage for us.
Yeah, I think again, this is where accountability can come in play. We have to hold every business that's pouring or that's marketing into the black and brown communities of America, we have to hold these corporations accountable. For example, there's one advocate that I know that he lives right here in Atlanta. He goes by Killer Mike. I love Killer Mike. I think he's, you know, one of the most well-thought individuals that I personally know and deal with. And one of the things that he's teaching right now is focusing on the reinvestment and focusing on the development of the black and brown communities and having the banks to be held accountable for every dollar that comes in and comes out. Because one thing that we do know is business want money. A business can't survive without money, right? So I'm very advocate, and as a minority processor, you know, we are sitting at a place, for example, right now, you say, well, what are you guys doing as a minority processor to reinvent the act here? What are you doing to reinvest into the community? Well, every business, minority business that signs on to our gateway and our platform, we give 10% back into that community. In addition to, we signed up with a program that goes into a lot of the city schools that are within the different metropolitan areas, and we donate meals to these kids, because one of the stats that we did not know and found out through our educational system, that a lot of the kids go hungry on the weekends. And so, because they're used to getting their meals at school, see. So we're doing these types of things that actually are trying to make a difference and will make a difference.
And that kid that doesn't go hungry is going to remember that, and that's going to keep him out of crime. It's going to keep him into, you know, some good things. I seen there was a question over there. Go ahead.
Thanks. So your stat that Wells declined 50-odd%
Yes.
of mortgage applications from black applicants.
Yes.
I work for Microsoft.
Okay.
So big into the data behind that. So how much of, and I'm Canadian, so I know this much about the legacy of redlining here, so I don't, I want to be educated. How much of that decline rate, you know, like they're credit models, right?
Mm-hmm.
Do you have data on, you know, all other things being equal, would a white family have been approved?
It actually wasn't all things equal. They were comparing the net worth of a black male over 100,000 to the net worth of a white male of about 20 to 30,000. It wasn't all things equal, and we still had a lower chance of approval.
So I'd love to, because this is something that a company like Microsoft might be able to work with those banks to, because we have this AI for good thing, and try to use data responsibly.
Okay.
I'd love to learn more about that and how, you know, this entire community, folks who, you know, geek out on data, how can we unpack that and pinpoint where the bias exists so we can start to change it? We need to really peel back the onion on it.
I actually agree. We're actually going on our $1 Million Challenge, where we're going to go to 1 million households. And one of the things we really want to do is gather some of that data. We have to be filling out our applications differently. We have to be setting up our accounts differently. I don't think the answer is the race on the application. I think that the answer is the back end part. We are doing something differently in our lifestyles than our white Americans, and it has to come down to the knowledge that we're missing. And the data will get us that gap. Like, what are we missing here that they don't miss? And that's the answer that we have to get to. That's how we can close that racial wealth gap. Because if we don't start allowing home ownership, the black American race is supposed to have the net worth of 0 by 2053. So it's very, very important that we start really addressing some of these home ownership problems. Because we pretty much have closed the income gap. We have pretty much closed the education gap. The only gap that lays right now is the wealth gap. And it's very, very important that we get on this as soon as possible.
And I can piggyback off of what he's talking about. I actually wrote a stat down, and I thought it was amazing, that money circulates 1 time in the African American community, 6 times in the Latino community, 9 times in the Asian community. And in many white neighborhoods, it's nearly unlimited number of times. And so, and by understanding that portion right there, it explains the wealth gap for black communities. And it also, and now we're at the McKinsey report, you guys can read that as well, but it talks about how blacks have nearly 1 trillion gross national income. Only 2% of it is reinvested into the black communities. And so, and I put a note here too, because as I was doing my research and really, looking at the detailed fine print of this, the key is that income needs to stay into the black community longer. For example, a dollar circulates 6 hours in the African American community. 6 hours. Compared to 20 days in the Jewish community and 30 days in the Asian community. So that right there explains a lot to me of we still got a long way to go. And with our retailers and our banks that can start the educational resources and pouring into our communities, that's what's going to make this thing better. Especially when you know that you're seeing that we're spending and spending and spending.
And when it comes to the Asian community, I just recently found out that they're the fastest growing demographic in America. They had an 81% population growth since the year 2000. They're far outpacing every other ethnic group in America. There's about 41 different ethnic or Asian ethnic groups in America, and they're pretty diverse. And I've read a couple studies on Asians. My grandmother was actually an Asian immigrant, and they don't feel represented in America. They don't feel, I've read reports, they only see themselves as tech geeks or as nerds. And they want to have the ability to have more to themselves. They want to be seen in beauty commercials. They want to be seen in superhero commercials, and they're lacking that. And this is a demographic that's going to outpace our black spending within the next 5 years. And they have almost little to no representation in public. And I think that's one of the bigger markets that's unaddressed right now, pretty much by all companies. Like, I think there's a lot of focus on black communities right now, and there's very little on like some of the brown and Asian communities that do exist with a lot of money and a lot of equity.
Yeah. Well, that also filtrates back to our own community leaders that we have in each respective, black community, black and brown community in America. I mean, the accountability has to start with us. And we've heard it said a bunch of times that if we don't start making efforts now, our generation is lost. The next generation is lost. And so opening these new businesses, having new corporations to sponsor or support these other minority-owned businesses out here in America that are opening their doors right now and come in and support these black and brown businesses that you see. Because that money goes a long way, as we've discussed today. That money keeps circling in these communities, and it only can help.
I agree. I think that as a country, we need to get to the point where you're just supporting the best option. And you're going to see that the best option for you is going to be something that's close to you because you can relate to it. And I really think we need to get back to small businesses and get away from some of the Walmarts, get away from some of the Targets. Like, those big brands have pretty much destroyed some of the small markets. They have destroyed some of our SMBs. They have really kind of outpaced and outplaced the minorities. And I really, really think we need to get back to just supporting the person you've seen on the street, supporting your neighbor.
Yeah. The biggest thing is too, from the last session too, it filtrates over into what's happening right now in America. You have a lot of black and brown individuals, especially in the business markets and corporate markets, they're really focused in on blockchain with the community, and I'm bringing that up because originally we talked about why are we not performing well, and why are we focused on this brand and not this brand. Like, if it's a white brand owned product versus a black owned product, why doesn't the black community support the black owned product? They run to the white owned community product, right? And with those are facts, and I think most people know that. And those are the trends we have to change. And because again, if you don't support something, it'll fail. But as far as the blockchain was what I wanted to reference was, people are hungry. People are hungry out here. And when I say hungry, I mean hungry for knowledge. And they're learning, and they can come to events like this, and they can learn more. And they can partner with companies like Microsoft where they can put stuff out. And these other large corporations that are represented today, you guys can do a lot with the black and brown communities of America just by extending educational resources or partnering with certain agencies and banks within the minority communities in America.
So from the same report that I mentioned earlier from McKinsey, they found that black Americans were willing to spend 30 cents on the dollar premium to support a black business. Is that something you've seen as true as in your experience as a payments company? Do you see Black Americans are willing to spend more for a Black product? Or do you think that McKinsey report may have been wrong because of the limited amount of respondents? I genuinely disagree with the McKinsey report.
Yeah, I do see it, because from the Black vendors that we do have on our gateway now, it's unfortunate they don't spend, they would rather get it cheaper. They feel like, oh, because he or she looks like me, that we're supposed to get it cheaper. But then that person can go to another ethnicity and pay full price. So that happens.
Yeah,
and so that goes back to building value
and
trust into the community of saying, hey, no, we are a legitimate business. This is why you got to buy from us. So it'll circulate. It's an education process.
And it's coming along. I think over the last couple of years, especially during 2020 with some of the riots, the amount of pride and supporting your own is starting to raise up. Have you seen that over the last 2 years, that there's kind of the steady rise of self-supporting type in the communities?
What I have noticed and witnessed is more businesses are being opened.
Okay.
People are wanting to leave their jobs more. More Black Americans are leaving their corporate jobs and starting their vision that they had 10 years ago, whether it's becoming caterer, whether it's becoming open your own landscaping business, whatever it is. People are now doing that. They're taking the risk. I'm sorry?
Do you think that's sustainable for our communities?
Oh yeah, sustainability is where, again, that's going back to reinvesting. You got to set the example and set the bar. We have to set the bar. The accountability comes in place, setting the bar, and then executing. There's no ifs, ands, or buts. Because you cannot blame, we as a Black community and as Black leaders, and we cannot continue to blame the system when we're not doing our own part. We have to do our own part first.
I do think that we raised our hand up that some of these companies that have profited off of us should reach down and help us up as well.
Yeah.
Because nearly every major company, every major bank has profited off of our failures here.
Well, the world is profiting off of, again, we're going to be hitting $1.7 trillion by 2030.
Like, one of my favorite quotes is that right out of slavery, we had about 117 Black banks. We have about 20 now.
Yeah.
And where did those Black banks go? They all consolidated up into some of the big banks who then also left our neighborhoods. So I would really like to see some of those major banks, some of those major corporations come and put a branch in the neighborhoods. Make it easier to buy a home. It's much easier to buy a home when you're in person, and it's harder to say no. Like, hey, even though you're qualified, I'm going to say no because you're Black. It's very hard to do that in person. So I would like to see some of those major banks put branches back in the neighborhoods and really try to help, the payment system here and the circulation of our money.
Yeah, and the circulation piece, and this is the whole subject of this session, is the power of minority. You, as a non-Black person that would sit out there in the audience, understand that this is more than just words. These are things, real problems that are existing in the Black and brown communities in America. And so having a takeaway of saying, what can I do in my position? Or what do I have access to that can give other resources for education, for a greater municipality? Whatever those reasons are, that's what you should be taking away, because again, understanding that topic alone, understand the power of the transaction, because that's a multitude of conversations that we don't have time to even go into today, but it will absolutely blow your mind on the stats.
Do you think the circulation of money is going to continue to increase within our communities? I know within Detroit, they just had a report recently, just came out that we are at an all-time high when it comes to black businesses in Detroit. So we are also seeing the pop of so many Black businesses, and you only can pretty much go to who's around. Do you think that's going to continue, or do you think we've hit that peak because we're coming out of COVID and people are going to have to go back into the workforce?
No, I think because whether they want to believe it or not, I think we are in a recession. I don't care what the commentators say on TV. Mm-hmm. People are tired. They don't want to go back to work. They want to start and focus on their own idea, own vision. So I think if we encourage more people stepping out on risk and following that, that is where you see the recirculation of the generational wealth that will start somewhere.
Turning that 1 hour to 6 hours,
Yeah, yeah, so.
or 20 days. I would prefer 20 days.
Question down there.
Yes.
So, based on what you just said, it sounds like, and correct me if I'm wrong, supporting and finding a way to really produce more entrepreneurs, right? Basically, educating and supporting around entrepreneurship would create, in essence, that lift from a business owner, the knowledge aspect, circulation, all that comes in line with business ownership. And to your point, following your dream. Is that correct?
That is correct. That is correct
I
all
agree
day.
as well.
I had a question, just sort of one along what you're talking about. A lot of, small business really like drives our communities. But one of the challenges that I think a lot of small business owners face is like that ease of payments, specifically for, Black and minority businesses. So I would ask, what challenges you all may have faced when it comes to like ease of payments with your businesses, and then what suggestions would you have to make that process easier for Black businesses and their customers?
Well, from my perspective, we deal with a lot of different business owners that need capital, of course. That's every, I don't just say every Black business owner, it's every business owner needs capital, period, But when I see things come across my desk and there's different companies, and I understand there's buy here, pay here people and companies out here and pay zero down now and pay $150 on it a month, whatever it is. I push that stuff to the side, honestly, because to me, that's not what a business owner needs. A business owner needs customers. And our company grew from organic roots. We didn't go out and raise money. We didn't do any of that. And hard work does pay off. It truly does. So only time I would entertain any buy here, pay here now, or adopt any type of, pay plan into our gateway. My CTO is sitting back there. I would discourage it.
Okay, and I guess it's not so much the buy now, pay later or anything like that. I just mean just having, what methods have worked for you to ensure that when a customer is trying to make a transaction with their company, they can, and they're not forced to go look somewhere else just because, for whatever reason, you all weren't able to, handle that transaction. Like a lot of black businesses may not, may only take cash and things like that. So what suggestions do you have?
It's a good question. One of the problems that we've seen out here now in the merchant processing industry, and many pay people are here, they know that's your report card of your business. That's where you bring in money. We've made it a practice to make sure that we can walk them through the process and getting them off of the PayPals and off of the Squares, because that doesn't help them none. And showing them and teaching them, hey, this is how this business is made. This is how much money we made off of you for your transactions, and this is what we're charging you. And one of the other biggest things that I found over the last 2 years, when business owners get their merchant statements, they don't even know how to read them. They don't even know what they're spending, why they're being charged, and then they get mad, and then they want to leave that company and go to the next one, and it's still not resolving anything. So understanding how to read what you're spending your money on is very important. And I'll say this too, and for me personally, when I started my company, I was always the only Black in the room when it came to merchant processing, trying to become a licensed registered ISO. Everywhere I went, every conference, every meeting, and trying to place myself at the table, right? A lot of things that I didn't understand they were talking about. Terms, what's this, what's that. I didn't understand any of it. So what I did, I took the time to go and I understood every single thing to where I become a master at it. And then I went back to the drawing board and recreated it all over again. So now we're processing, $2 billion a year. So again, you have to put yourself in a position to win, no matter what, no matter how hard it hurts. So, and I know you can understand. So.
I definitely can. Yes.
So you've said a few times that education is key. I mean, I've been involved in financial literacy circles for 15 years, and the problem, there is a ton of content out there to get educated. And you just said yourself, you know, there's a lot of jargon and complexity in this industry. You worked hard to learn it. The content is there. What's the gap? How do we make it more accessible, welcoming? Like what's the gap between the need for, yes, people need education, the content is there, we're not able to bring them together to get people educated. What do you think the problem is?
I'm going to put that back on the community leaders. And the reason why I say that is because in the Black and brown communities in America, between the churches, between the politicians, this is where you can hand that information off, because guess what? If they want their members to keep tithing in their churches, if they want to continue to get these votes every year, you have to educate your community. You have to give the people something that it's invaluable. And education is the best invaluable thing you can teach them and let them go do great things.
And to jump into that, so about 66% of Black households don't own any stocks or mutual funds. Yet we kind of did Bitcoin at 2-to-1 rate compared to white Americans. So the trust is the big point. Like our community leaders were telling us, invest in Bitcoin, you can make money in Bitcoin. You don't really see our community leaders saying, hey, Stanford & Poor is up 28% this year. The Dow, you don't hear that. So it really comes down to the community. Like our leaders, our athletes, our speakers, they have to be telling that the stock market is trustworthy, you can trust the banks, and we don't have that. But we did have that with crypto.
Isn't that, I think you missed the point. I've been working, do you know Baxter Lewis by any chance? Anyway, he's a Black business leader. He's been very successful at education, particularly in PC. He's absolutely fantastic consultant. But what I see is a role model. You've got to have, you talk about leaders. When I look at Baxter Lewis, I see a role model. And he's selling education as a role model. I just wonder because the Black community looks to him. He's super fantastic at what he does, super successful, and they see education is actually a role model that is going to help you grow, and be able to be successful in society. So, any thoughts about that? About just this idea of a role model, right?
Yeah.
So important, right?
Yeah, I mean, the community has to have people to look up to. That's bottom line. And again, that goes back to accountability. So we got to hold everybody, each of us accountable. If we say something, hold me accountable. I don't care what leader or person it is. So, yeah, I agree with you.
I agree with you as well, and that concludes our talk. If there's any final questions, you guys are more than willing to come up and ask us. Thank you for your time.
Thanks a lot. Appreciate it.